Okay, tonight is the 19th of August, and we come to Majjhima Nikaya Sutta 77, Sakuludayin Sutta, the greater discourse to Sakuludayin. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. On that occasion, a number of well-known wanderers were staying in the peacock sanctuary, the wondrous park, that is Anabara, Varadara, and the wanderer Sakuludayin, and as well as other well-known wanderers. Then when it was morning, the Blessed One dressed, and taking his bowl and outer robe, went into Rajagaha for alms. Then he thought, it is still too early to wander for alms in Rajagaha. Suppose I went to the wanderer Sakuludayin in the peacock sanctuary, the wanderer's park. Then the Blessed One went to the peacock sanctuary, the wanderer's park. Now on that occasion, the wanderer Sakuludayin was seated with a large assembly of wanderers who were making an uproar, loudly and noisily talking many kinds of pointless talk, such as talk of kings, etc. Stop for a moment. So here refers to the tirachana kata, animal talk, or base talk, low talk, pointless talk. Then the wanderer Sakuludayin saw the Blessed One coming in the distance. Seeing him, he quieted his own assembly thus: Sirs, be quiet. Sirs, make no noise. Here comes the recluse Gotama. This venerable one likes quiet and commends quiet. Perhaps if he finds our assembly a quiet one, he will think to join us. Then the wanderers became silent. The Blessed One went to the wanderer Sakuludayin, who said to him, Let the Blessed One come, venerable sir. Welcome to the Blessed One. It is long since the Blessed One found an opportunity to come here. Let the Blessed One be seated. This seat is ready. The Blessed One sat down on the seat made ready, and the wanderer Sakuludayin took a low seat and sat down at one side. Stop here for a moment. So here again, you see, the Buddha was quite friendly with some of the external ascetics, and they had great respect for him, invited him to sit down, and this Sakuludayin, the leader of the wanderers, took a lower seat. When he had done so, the Blessed One asked him, For what discussion are you sitting together here now, Udayin? And what was your discussion that was interrupted? Venerable sir, that be the discussion for which we are now sitting together here. The Blessed One can well hear about it later. In recent days, Venerable Sir, when recluses and Brahmins of various sects have been gathering together and sitting together in the debating hall, this topic has arisen. It is a gain for the people of Anga and Magadha. It is a great gain for the people of Anga and Magadha that these recluses and Brahmins, heads of orders, heads of groups, teachers of groups, well-known and famous founders of sects, regarded by many as saints, have come to spend the rains at Rajagaha. There is this Purana Kassapa, the head of an order, the head of a group, the teacher of a group, the well-known and famous founder of a sect, regarded by many as a saint. He has come to spend the rains at Rajagaha. Similarly, there is also this Makali Gosala, Ajita Kesa Kambalin, Pakuda Kachayana, Sanjaya Belati Putta, Niganta Nata Putta, the head of an order, the head of a group, the teacher of a group, well-known and famous founder of a sect, regarded by many as a saint. He too has come to spend the rains at Rajagaha. There is also this recluse Gotama, the head of an order, the head of a group, the teacher of a group, the well-known and famous founder of a sect, regarded by many as a saint. He too has come to spend the rains at Rajagaha. Stop here for a moment. In India, they have 3 seasons. The rainy season, followed by winter, and followed by summer. And each one of them is 4 months. So it is a tradition in India during the rain season, 4 months, that the monks, ascetics, wanderers, all, they will spend 3 months, at least 3 months, on retreat, because they say during this period of the rains, a lot of insects and worms come out from the ground. So if they walk around, and they'll be killing all these insect and plant and these worms, etc. Originally, the Buddha did not practice this, but later, because of lay people criticizing, so the Buddha asked the monks to follow also. Now here is mentioned the 6 external sect ascetics, the leaders of different groups of wanderers, and they are all supposed to be very famous during the time of the Buddha. Purana Kassapa, Makali Gosala, Ajita Kesa Kambalin, Pakuda Kachayana, Sanjaya, Balati Putta, and Iganta Nataputta. Now among these worthy recluses and Brahmins, heads of orders, etc., regarded by many as saints, who is honored, respected, revered, and venerated by his disciples, and how, honoring and respecting him, do they live in dependence on him. Thereupon some said this Purana Kassapa is the head of an order, etc., regarded by many as a saint, yet he is not honored, respected, revered, and venerated by his disciples, nor do his disciples live in dependence on him, honoring and respecting him. Once Purana Kassapa was teaching his Dhamma to an assembly of several hundred followers. Then a certain disciple of his made a noise thus, Sirs, do not ask Purana Kassapa this question. He does not know that. We know that. Ask us that question. We will answer that for you, sirs. It happened that Purana Kassapa did not get his way, though he waved his arms and wailed, Be quiet, sirs. Make no noise, sirs. They are not asking you, sirs. They are asking us. We will answer them. Indeed, many of his disciples left him after refuting his doctrine thus, You do not understand this Dhamma Vinaya. I understand this Dhamma Vinaya. How could you understand this Dhamma Vinaya? Your way is wrong. My way is right. I am consistent. You are inconsistent. What should have been said first, you said last. What should have been said last, you said first. What you had so carefully thought up has been turned inside out. Your doctrine is refuted. You are proved wrong. Go and learn better, or disentangle yourself if you can. Thus Purana Kassapa is not honored, respected, revered, and venerated by his disciples, nor do his disciples live in dependence on him, honoring and respecting him. Indeed, he is scorned by the scorn shown into his Dhamma. Similarly, and some said this Makali Gosala is the head of an order, etc., yet he is not honored, respected, revered, and venerated by his disciples as before. And similarly for Sanjaya, Balati Putta, Niganta Nataputta, etc. Indeed, he is scorned by the scorn shown to his Dhamma. So stop here for a moment. So all these 6 external sect ascetics, although they are supposed to be very famous, and many of them claim to be omniscient and all-knowing, yet the disciples don't show the respect for them. You see, like when this Purana Kassapa was teaching, his disciple contradict him and tell people to ask him instead. He thinks, the disciple thinks he knows better. So this was the same for all the others. And some said this recluse Gotama is the head of an order, the head of a group, the teacher of a group, the well-known and famous founder of a sect, regarded by many as a saint. He is honored, respected, revered, and venerated by his disciples, and his disciples live in dependence on him, honoring and respecting him. Once the recluse Gotama was teaching his Dhamma to an assembly of several hundred followers, and there a certain disciple of his cleared his throat. Thereupon one of his companions in the holy life nudged him with his knee to indicate, Be quiet, Venerable Sir, make no noise. The Blessed One, the teacher, is teaching us the Dhamma. When the recluse Gotama is teaching the Dhamma to an assembly of several hundred followers, on that occasion there is no sound of his disciples coughing or clearing their throats. For then that large assembly is poised in expectancy. Let us hear the Dhamma the Blessed One is about to teach. Just as though a man were at the crossroads pressing out pure honey, and a large group of people were poised in expectancy, so too when the recluse Gotama is teaching the Dhamma to an assembly of several hundred followers, on that occasion there is no sound of his disciples coughing or clearing their throats. For then that large assembly is poised in expectancy. Let us hear the Dhamma the Blessed One is about to teach. And even those disciples of his who fall out with their companions in the holy life and abandon the training to return to the low life, Even they praise the Master and the Dhamma and the Sangha. They blame themselves instead of others, saying, "We were unlucky, we have little merit, for though we went forth into homelessness in such a well-proclaimed Dhamma, we were unable to live the perfect and pure holy life for the rest of our lives." Having become monastery attendants or lay followers, they undertake and observe the 5 precepts. Thus the recluse Gotama is honored, respected, revered and venerated by his disciples, and his disciples live in dependence on him, honoring and respecting him. Stop it for a moment. So you can see the Buddha is very different from the external ascetics. He commands the respect of his disciples. But Udayin, how many qualities do you see in me because of which my disciples honor, respect, revere and venerate me, and live in dependence on me, honoring and respecting me? Venerable Sir, I see 5 qualities in the Blessed One, because of which his disciples honor, respect, revere and venerate him, and live in dependence on him, honoring and respecting him. What are the 5? First, Venerable Sir, the Blessed One eats little and commends eating little. This I see as the first quality of the Blessed One, because of which his disciples honor, respect, revere and venerate him, and live in dependence on him, honoring and respecting him. Again, Venerable Sir, the Blessed One is content with any kind of robe, and commends contentment with any kind of robe. This I see as the second quality of the Blessed One. Again, Venerable Sir, the Blessed One is content with any kind of alms food, and commends contentment with any kind of alms food. This I see as the third quality of the Blessed One. Again, Venerable Sir, the Blessed One is content with any kind of resting place, and commends contentment with any kind of resting place. This I see as the fourth quality of the Blessed One. Again, Venerable Sir, the Blessed One is secluded and commends seclusion. This I see as the fifth quality of the Blessed One. Venerable Sir, these are the 5 qualities I see in the Blessed One, because of which his disciples honor, respect, revere and venerate him, and live in dependence on him, honoring and respecting him. So this Udayin, or Sakuludayin, he says the Buddha possesses 5 qualities. To him, these it's because of these 5 qualities the Buddha's disciples respect him, venerate him. First one, the Buddha eats little. Second, he's content with any kind of robe. Third, he's content with any kind of alms food. Fourth, he's content with any kind of resting place, sleeping place. And fifth, he's secluded and commends seclusion. Suppose, Udayin, my disciples honored, respected, revered and venerated me, and lived in dependence on me, honoring and respecting me with the thought, the recluse Gotama eats little and commends eating little. Now there are disciples of mine who live on a cupful or half a cupful of food, a bilva fruits or half a bilva fruits quantity of food, while I sometimes eat the full contents of my alms bowl, or even more. So if my disciples honored me with the thought, the recluse Gotama eats little and commends eating little, then those disciples of mine who live on a cupful of food, or half a cupful of food, or a bilva fruits quantity of food, or half a bilva fruits quantity of food, should not honor, respect, revere and venerate me for this quality, nor should they live in dependence on me, honoring and respecting me. Suppose, Udayin, my disciples honored, respected, revered and venerated me, and lived in dependence on me, honoring and respecting me with the thought, the recluse Gotama is content with any kind of robe, and commends contentment with any kind of robe. Now there are disciples of mine who are refuse rag wearers, wearers of coarse robes. They collect rags from the charnel ground, rubbish heaps or shops, and make them into patch robes and wear them. But I sometimes wear robes given by householders, robes so fine that pumpkin hair is coarse in comparison. So if my disciples honored me with the thought, the recluse Gotama is content with any kind of robe, and commends contentment with any kind of robe, then those disciples of mine who are refuse rag wearers, wearers of coarse robes, should not honor, respect, revere and venerate me for this quality, nor should they live in dependence on me, honoring and respecting me. Suppose, Udayin, my disciples honored, respected, revered and venerated me, and lived in dependence on me, honoring and respecting me with the thought, The recluse Gotama is content with any kind of alms food and commends contentment with any kind of alms food. Now there are disciples of mine who are alms food eaters, who go on unbroken alms round from house to house, who delight in gathering their food. When they have entered among the houses, they will not consent even when invited to sit down. But I sometimes eat on invitation meals of choice rice and many sauces and curries. So if my disciples honored me with the thought, the recluse Gotama is content with any kind of alms food and commends contentment with any kind of alms food, then those disciples of mine who are alms food eaters should not honor, respect, revere, and venerate me for this quality, nor should they live in dependence on me, honoring and respecting me. Suppose, Udayin, my disciples honored, respected, revered, and venerated me, and live in dependence on me, honoring and respecting me with the thought, the recluse Gotama is content with any kind of resting place and commends contentment with any kind of resting place. Now there are disciples of mine who are tree-root dwellers and open-air dwellers who do not use a roof for 8 months of the year, while I sometimes live in gable mansions plastered within and without, protected against the wind, secured by door bolts with shuttered windows. So if my disciples honored me with the thought, the recluse Gotama is content with any kind of resting place and commends contentment with any kind of resting place, then those disciples of mine who are tree-root dwellers and open-air dwellers should not honor, respect, revere, and venerate me for this quality, nor should they live in dependence on me, honoring and respecting me. Suppose, Udayin, my disciples honored, respected, revered, and venerated me, and lived in dependence on me, honoring and respecting me with the thought, the recluse Gotama is secluded and commends seclusion. Now there are disciples of mine who are forest dwellers, dwellers in remote resting places, who live withdrawn in remote jungle thicket resting places, and return to the midst of the Sangha once each half month for the recitation of the Patimokkha. But I sometimes live surrounded by monks and nuns, by men and women lay followers, by kings and kings' ministers, by other sectarians and their disciples. So if my disciples honored me with the thought, the recluse Gotama is secluded and commends seclusion, then those disciples of mine who are forest dwellers should not honor, respect, revere, and venerate me for this quality, nor should they live in dependence on me, honoring and respecting me. Thus, Udayin, it is not because of these 5 qualities that my disciples honor, respect, revere, and venerate me, and live in dependence on me, honoring and respecting me. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says it is not because of these 5 qualities, because many of his disciples are even more ascetic than the Buddha. But the Buddha, before he was enlightened, he had already practiced asceticism to the very, very extreme. So he found that what was not beneficial, he just put it down, let go of it. And so the Buddha says it is not because of these 5 qualities, because if it is because of these 5 qualities, then they would not respect him. The first one, eating little. Some of his disciples eat much less than the Buddha. And then second one, robes. Some of them refuse to wear robes offered by lay people. They only want to use robes from stitching cloth, which is picked up mainly from the charnel ground. Charnel ground is like a cemetery where they throw the corpses to rot. And there they go and pull the cloth from the corpses and wash them and use them. Then the third one, this second one, the Buddha says sometimes he uses ropes so fine that pumpkin hair is coarse in comparison. Third one, the Buddha says sometimes he is invited to eat meals in lay people's house, and he eats choice food, whereas some of his disciples refuse to accept invitation to houses. Every day they go on alms round, and even when invited inside lay people's house to eat, they will refuse. They just beg for their food and eat in a secluded place. Then number 4, The Buddha said some of his disciples are tree-root dwellers and open-air dwellers. They only live under the tree or in the open air. Do not use a roof for 8 months of the year. Why? Because those 8 months are not the rainy season. During the rainy season, the Buddhas made a rule that the monks must stay under a roof and do this Vasa retreat for 3 months. And the last month is a time when they look for cloth and to make robes. The Buddha was quite strict about the monks looking for cloth. He didn't want them to spend their time looking for cloth all the time. So he only allowed the last month of the rainy season, once a year, for them to go and look for cloth and make the robes. That was initially. So these monks who dwell under the tree and in the open air, they do not have a roof over their head for 8 months of the year, except during the Vasa rainy season. They have to live under a roof. Then the last one, it is not because of seclusion that the Buddha is respected by his disciples, because the Buddha says there are some disciples of his who live in remote resting places, far withdrawn from people, and they return to the Sangha once each half month, every 2 weeks, for the Uposatha. The Uposatha is the 15th day of the lunar month, and the 30th day of the lunar month. If no 30 days, then it's a 29th day. On these 2 days of the month, the monks come together and recite the Patimokkha, the 227 precepts. So other than that, they will dwell alone in very remote resting places. And the Buddha says he is different. Sometimes he's surrounded by a lot of people, monks, nuns, lay followers, and kings and ministers and other sectarians, etc. However, Udayin, there are 5 other qualities because of which my disciples honor, respect, revere and venerate me, and live in dependence on me, honoring and respecting me. What are the 5? The first one is the higher virtue. Here, Udayin, my disciples esteem me for the higher virtue, or higher moral conduct, sila. The recluse Gotama is virtuous. He possesses the supreme aggregate of virtue. This is the first quality because of which my disciples honor, respect, revere and venerate me, and live in dependence on me, honoring and respecting me. So the first one, the Buddha says, his moral conduct is without blemish. You cannot find any fault at all with his moral conduct. Second one is knowledge and vision. Again, Udayin, my disciples esteem me for my excellent knowledge and vision thus. When the recluse Gotama says, I know, he truly knows. When he says, I see, he truly sees. The recluse Gotama teaches the Dhamma through direct knowledge, not without direct knowledge. He teaches the Dhamma with a sound basis, not without a sound basis. He teaches the Dhamma in a convincing manner, not in an unconvincing manner. This is the second quality because of which my disciples honor me. Third one is the higher wisdom. Again, Udayin, my disciples esteem me for the higher wisdom thus. The recluse Gotama is wise. He possesses the supreme aggregate of wisdom. It is impossible that he should not foresee the future courses of doctrine, or that he should not be able to confute with reasons the current doctrines of others. What do you think, Udayin? Would my disciples, knowing and seeing thus, break in and interrupt me? No, Venerable Sir. I do not expect instruction from my disciples. Invariably, it is my disciples who expect instruction from me. This is the third quality because of which my disciples honor me. This third quality, I must know, because the Buddha is psychic. What is the disciples think? He can already read their mind. So none of them dare to question the Buddha, argue with the Buddha. The fourth one is the Four Noble Truths. Again, Udayin, when my disciples have met with suffering and become victims of suffering, prey to suffering, they come to ask me, they come to me and ask me about the noble truth of suffering. Being asked, I explain to them the noble truth of suffering, and I satisfy their minds with my explanation. They ask me about the noble truth of the origin of suffering, about the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, about the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Being asked, I explain to them the noble truth, the noble truths, and I satisfy their minds with my explanation. This is the fourth quality because of which my disciples honor me. So these are the four qualities. The fifth one is very long. The fifth one is the Buddha gives a list of the way to develop wholesome states that he has taught. If I were to go through all this in detail, it will take a long time, so I will just go to the main topics. The first one is the four foundations of mindfulness or recollection. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to develop the four intense states of mindfulness or recollection, satipatthana. Here, among abides contemplating the body in the body, etc. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to develop the four right kinds of striving, samappadana. Here among awakens zeal for the non-arising of unarisen, evil, unwholesome states, and makes effort, rouses energy, exerts his mind and strives, etc., etc. So these are four right kinds of striving. Third one is the four bases for psychic power, iddhipada. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to develop the four bases for psychic power. Here among develops the basis for psychic power consisting in concentration due to zeal, etc. Then the five faculties. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to develop the five spiritual faculties. Here among develops the faculty of faith, energy, mindfulness or recollection, concentration, wisdom. And then after that, five powers. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to develop the five powers. Here among develops the power of faith, energy, mindfulness or recollection, concentration and wisdom. Then the seven enlightenment factors. Again, Udayan, I proclaim to my disciples the way to develop the seven enlightenment factors. Here among develops the enlightenment factor of recollection, investigation of Dhamma, energy, delight, tranquility, concentration, equanimity, and then after that the Noble Eightfold Path. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to develop the Noble Eightfold Path. Here among develops right view, right thoughts, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right recollection and right concentration. And thereby many disciples of mine abide having reached the consummation and perfection of direct knowledge. Stop here for a moment. So here you see these, the Buddha says in other suttas, this is the most important part of his teachings when it comes to practicing the path to liberation. What are these? These are called the 37 Bodhipakya Dhamma. I think, what's the translation? Bodhipakya Dhamma. Wings to enlightenment. Now these, how do you get 37? You have the four satipatthana, four samappadana, and four iddhipada, that's 16. Then five faculties and five powers, total 26. And then seven enlightenment factors and Noble Eightfold Path. So you add them up, you get 37. But in another sutta, the Buddha says, if you practice the Noble Eightfold Path fully, completely, you will also at the same time would have developed 37 Bodhipakya Dhamma. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to develop the 8 liberations. Possessed of material form, one sees form. This is the first liberation. Not perceiving form internally, one sees forms externally. One is resolved only upon the beautiful. And then after that, the base of infinite space, base of infinite consciousness, base of nothingness, base of neither perception nor non-perception, then cessation of perception and feeling. These are the 8 liberations. Now, I want to mention something here. These 8 liberations, in the commentaries, they say these 8 liberations refers, the first 3 refers to the 4 jhanas. Having attained the 4 jhanas, then he can attain the first 3. He sees forms, then he sees forms externally, and then resolve upon the beautiful. And then after that is followed by the 4 arupa jhanas and cessation of perception and feeling. But this contradicts the Anguttara Nikaya 4.89, where they talk about the blue lotus recluse. So these 8 liberations is not talking about the 4 rupa jhanas. It only talks about the 4 arupa jhanas and cessation. Because they have used this to say that the Arahant liberated by wisdom does not possess the jhanas. That is wrong, because if you read this Anguttara Nikaya Sutta 4.89 about the blue lotus recluse, then you can see the contradiction. Okay, again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to develop the 8 bases for transcendence. Perceiving form internally, one sees form externally, limited, fair and ugly. Perceiving form internally, one sees form externally, immeasurable. Not perceiving form internally, one sees form externally, limited. Not perceiving form internally, one sees forms externally, immeasurable. Not perceiving form internally, one sees forms externally, blue in color. Not perceiving form internally, one sees form externally, yellow. Not perceiving form externally, one sees forms. Not perceiving form internally, one sees forms externally, red. And not perceiving form internally, one sees forms externally, white. So these are the 8 bases for transcendence. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to develop the 10 kasina bases. Stop here for a moment. These 10 kasina bases, in India, even the external sect, ascetics also practice it. It is not unique to the Buddha's teachings. Even before the Buddha's time, yogis, meditators had already practiced it. So it is also one of the meditation methods of that the Buddha taught. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to develop the 4 jhanas. Here, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, monk enters upon and abides in the first jhana. Similarly, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to understand thus. This body of mine, made of material form, consisting of 4 great elements, procreated by mother and father and built up out of boiled rice and porridge, is subject to impermanence, to being born and rubbed away, to dissolution and disintegration. And this consciousness of mind is supported by it and bound up with it. So this one of the insight knowledges, abhinyas. And then after that, the mind-made body. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to create from this body another body having form, mind-made with all its limbs, lacking no faculty, just as though a man were to pull out a reed from its sheath and think thus: this is the sheath, this is the reed. The sheath is one, the reed is another. It is from the sheath that the reed has been pulled out. So too, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to create from this body another body having form. And then after that, the various kinds of psychic power, these psychokinesis. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to wield the various kinds of supernormal or psychic power. Having been one, one becomes many. Having been many, one becomes one. They appear and vanish. They go unhindered through walls, through enclosures, through mountains, as though through space. They dive in and out of earth as though it is water. They walk on water without sinking. Sitting cross-legged, they travel in space like a bird. With the hands, they touch and stroke the sun and moon. They wield mastery that means can fly, even as far as the Brahma world. And then after that, the divine ear element, or heavenly ear. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way whereby with the divine ear element, which is purified and surpasses the human, they hear both kinds of sounds, the divine and the human. and then reading the minds of others. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to understand the minds of other beings, of other persons, having encompassed them with their own minds. Then after that, the recollection of past lives. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to recollect the manifold past lives. 1 birth, 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, 100, 1,000, hundreds of thousands, many aeons, world cycles of world contraction, many world cycles of world expansion, etc. And then the divine eye or heavenly eye. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way whereby with the divine or heavenly eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, they see beings passing away and reappearing, inferior and superior, fair and ugly. They understand how beings pass on according to their actions or karma. Then after that, destruction of the asavas or taints. Again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way whereby, by realizing for themselves with direct knowledge, they here and now enter upon and abide in the liberation by mind and liberation by wisdom that are taintless with the destruction of the taints. This, Udayan, is the fifth quality because of which my disciples honor, respect, revere and venerate me, and live in dependence on me, honoring and respecting me. These, Udayan, are the five qualities because of which my disciples honor, respect and venerate me, and live in dependence on me, honoring and respecting me. This is what the Blessed One said. The wanderer Udayan was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. This last part, where the Buddha talks about the 8 knowledges, these are called the abhinyas. Sometimes they talk about 6 abhinyas. Here they talk about 8 abhinyas. The first one is the insight knowledge of the body and the mind, how they are supported and bound up with each other. The second one is creating a mind-made body. The third one is various kinds of psychic power. The fourth is the heavenly ear. Fifth is reading the minds of others. 6 is recollecting past lives. 7 is the heavenly eye. The 8 is the destruction of the asavas. So the Buddha says that this fifth one, his disciples venerate, honor him because he can teach them all these things. The 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas, the 8 liberations, the 8 bases for transcendence, the 10 kasinas, the 4 jhanas, and the 8 types of higher knowledge, abhinyas. So the Buddha says it's not because of ascetic practices that his disciples honor him, but because of these 5 things. The first one is the higher virtue, adhisila. The second one is knowledge and vision. Third one is the higher wisdom. Fourth, because he teaches the 4 noble truths. And then the fifth is the way to develop wholesome states up to liberation. Okay, now we come to another sutta, 78. Samanamandikaputta. Samanamandikaputta. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. Now on that occasion, the wanderer Ugahamana Samanamandikaputta was staying in Malika's park, the single hall Tinduka plantation for philosophical debates, together with a large following of wanderers, with as many as 300 wanderers. The carpenter Panchakanga went out from Savatthi at midday in order to see the Blessed One. And he thought, it is not the right time to see the Blessed One. He is still in retreat. And it is not the right time to see monks worthy of esteem. They are still in retreat. Suppose I went to Malika's park to the wanderer Ugahamana Samanamandikaputta. And he went to Malika's park. Now on that occasion, the wanderer Ugahamana was seated with a large assembly of wanderers who were making an uproar, loudly and noisily talking many kinds of pointless talk, such as talk of kings, etc. The wanderer Ugaha Mana, Samanamandikaputta, saw the carpenter Panchakanga coming in the distance. Seeing him, he quieted his own assembly thus: Sirs, be quiet. Sirs, make no noise. Here comes the carpenter Panchakanga, a disciple of the recluse Gotama, one of the recluse Gotama's white cloth lay disciples staying at Savatthi. These venerable ones like quiet. They are disciplined in quiet. They commend quiet. Perhaps if he finds our assembly a quiet one, he will think to join us. Then the wanderers became silent. Stop here for a moment. So you can see from here that these external ascetics, they not only have great respect for the Buddha's monk and nun disciples, even the Buddha's lay disciples, they have respect. And they think that somebody like this carpenter Panchakanga, he can teach them some Dhamma, so they want him to come. So they kept quiet. The carpenter Panchakanga went to the wanderer Ugaha Mana and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he sat down at one side. The wanderer Ugaha Mana then said to him, Carpenter, when a man possesses 4 qualities, I describe him as accomplished in what is wholesome, perfected in what is wholesome, attained to the supreme attainment, and ascetic invincible. What are the 4? Here he does no evil bodily actions, he utters no evil speech, he has no evil intentions, and he does not make his living by any evil livelihood. When a man possesses these 4 qualities, I describe him as accomplished in what is wholesome, perfected in what is wholesome, attained to the supreme attainment, and ascetic invincible. Stop here for a moment. So this time, instead of trying to learn some Dhamma, here he's trying to show off. He knows some Dhamma also. He's trying to teach this Panchakanga what he knows. He says, if a person possesses 4 things, then he says this person is perfected. And what are these 4 things? He does no evil bodily actions. He utters no evil speech. He has no evil intentions and does not make his living by any evil livelihood. Then the carpenter Panchakanga neither approved nor disapproved of the wanderer Ugaha Mana's words. Without doing either, he rose from his seat and went away, thinking, I shall learn the meaning of this statement in the presence of the Blessed One. Then he went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, he sat down at one side and reported to the Blessed One his entire conversation with the wanderer Ugaha Mana. Thereupon the Blessed One said, If that was so, carpenter, then a young tender infant lying prone is accomplished in what is wholesome, perfected in what is wholesome, attained to the supreme attainment, and ascetic invincible, according to the wanderer Ugaha Mana's statement. For a young tender infant lying prone does not even have the notion body, so how should he do an evil action beyond mere wriggling? A young tender infant lying prone does not even have the notion speech, so how should he utter evil speech beyond mere whining? A young tender infant lying prone does not even have the notion intention, so how should he have evil intentions beyond mere sulking? A young tender infant lying prone does not even have the notion livelihood, so how should he make his living by evil livelihood beyond being suckled at his mother's breast? If that were so, carpenter, then a young tender infant lying prone is accomplished in what is wholesome, perfected in what is wholesome, attained to the supreme attainment, and ascetic invincible. According to the wanderer Ugaha Mana's statement. When a man possesses 4 qualities, carpenter, I describe him not as accomplished in what is wholesome, or perfected in what is wholesome, or attained to the supreme attainment, or an ascetic invincible, but as one who stands in the same category as the young tender infant lying prone. What are the 4? Here he does no evil bodily actions, he utters no evil speech, he has no evil intentions, and he does not make his living by any evil livelihood. When a man possesses these 4 qualities, I describe him not as accomplished, etc., but as one who stands in the same category as the young tender infant lying prone. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha immediately demolished this Ugaha Mana's statement by saying, if you talk about these 4 qualities, then this young tender infant possesses these four qualities. Then if a So this person who possesses these 4 qualities, he is not a person who has attained to the supreme attainment, but he is in the same category as a baby. When a man possesses 10 qualities, carpenter, I describe him as accomplished in what is wholesome, perfected in what is wholesome, attained to the supreme attainment, and ascetic invincible. But first of all, I say, it must be understood thus. These are unwholesome habits, and thus unwholesome habits originate from this, and thus unwholesome habits cease without remainder here, and thus one practicing in this way is practicing the way to the cessation of unwholesome habits. And I say it must be understood thus. These are wholesome habits, and thus wholesome habits originate from this, and thus wholesome habits cease without remainder here, and thus one practicing in this way is practicing the way to the cessation of wholesome habits. And I say it must be understood thus. These are unwholesome thoughts, and thus unwholesome thoughts originate from this, and thus unwholesome thoughts cease without remainder here, and thus one practicing in this way is practicing to the way to the cessation of unwholesome thoughts. And I say it must be understood thus. These are wholesome thoughts, and thus wholesome thoughts originate from this, and thus wholesome thoughts cease without remainder here, and thus one practicing in this way is practicing the way to the cessation of wholesome thoughts. What are unwholesome habits? They are unwholesome bodily actions, unwholesome verbal actions, and evil livelihood. These are called unwholesome habits. And what do these unwholesome habits originate from? Their origin is stated. They should be said to originate from mind. What mind? Though mind is multiple, varied, and of different aspects, there is mind affected by lust, by hate, and by delusion. Unwholesome habits originate from this. I stop here for a moment. So here is interesting. One of the few places where the Buddha mentions mind is multiple, varied, and of different aspects. But here, unwholesome habits originate from the mind, which is affected by lust, hatred, and delusion. And where do these unwholesome habits cease without remainder? The cessation is stated. Here among abandons bodily misconduct and develops good bodily conduct. He abandons verbal misconduct and develops good verbal conduct. He abandons mental misconduct and develops good mental conduct. He abandons wrong livelihood and gains a living by right livelihood. It is here that unwholesome habits cease without remainder. And how practicing does he practice the way to the cessation of unwholesome habits? Here among awakened zeal for the non-arising of unarisen, even unwholesome states. And he makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind and strives. He awakens zeal for the abandoning of arisen, evil, unwholesome states. He awakens zeal for the arising of unarisen, wholesome states. He awakens zeal for the continuance, non-disappearance, strengthening, increase, fulfillment by development of arisen, wholesome states. And he makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind and strives. One so practices the way to the cessation of unwholesome habits. I'll stop here for a moment. This last paragraph is very important. This is about the 4 samapadanas, 4 right efforts. When we practice the spiritual path, we must continually look into our mind, whether they are unwholesome states or wholesome states. We should develop unwholesome states. When unwholesome states arise and give us suffering, we should immediately throw it out. Don't entertain it. If you entertain it, you're not putting effort in the right way. A lot of people, they think the spiritual path is attaining this jhana and that jhana, or some people think it's attaining this jnana and that jnana if they are practicing vipassana. But basically, the spiritual path is these 4 right efforts to get rid of unwholesome states of mind and develop wholesome states. Then in that way, we change our character. Otherwise, you cannot change your character. So if you want to change our character, especially if you want to be reborn in heaven, you got to change your character until you have the character of a deva or a devi. What are wholesome habits? They are wholesome bodily actions, wholesome verbal actions, and purification of livelihood. These are called wholesome habits. And what do these wholesome habits originate from? Their origin is stated. They should be said to originate from mind. What mind? Though mind is multiple, varied, and of different aspects, there is mind unaffected by lust, by hate, or by delusion. Wholesome habits originate from this. And where do these wholesome habits cease without remainder? Their cessation is stated. Here a monk is virtuous, but he does not identify with his virtue. And he understands as it actually is that liberation by mind and liberation by wisdom, where these wholesome habits cease without remainder. Stop here for a moment. This part also is quite interesting. A monk is virtuous, but he does not identify with his virtue. In other words, if a monk is practicing the holy path, he must always be careful about the ego. Sometimes somebody new on the path, when you are virtuous, you become egoistic. You look down on others who are not so virtuous, whose precepts are not so pure as you. So that's why here the Buddha says, you should not identify yourself with your virtue. And how practicing does he practice the way to the cessation of wholesome habits? Here a monk awakens zeal for the non-arising of unarisen evil wholesome states, for the continuance, non-disappearance, strengthening, increase and fulfillment by development of arisen wholesome states. And he makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind and strives. One so practices the way to the cessation of wholesome habits. So this is again practicing the 4 right efforts. What are unwholesome thoughts? They are the thought of sensual desire, the thought of ill will, the thought of cruelty. These are called unwholesome thoughts. And what do these unwholesome thoughts originate from? Their origin is stated. They should be said to originate from perception. What perception? Though perception is multiple, varied, and of different aspects, there is perception of sensual desire, perception of ill will, and perception of cruelty. Unwholesome thoughts originate from this. And where do these unwholesome thoughts cease without remainder? Their cessation is stated here. Here, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a monk enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of seclusion. It is here that unwholesome thoughts cease without remainder. I'll stop here for a moment. So, in the first jhana, what little thoughts remains is only wholesome thoughts. Thoughts connected with your meditation. You are not thinking of any unwholesome thoughts. The mind is quite controlled in the first jhana. And how practicing does he practice the way to the cessation of unwholesome thoughts? Here a monk awakens zeal for the non-arising of unarisen evil unwholesome states, for the continuance, etc. So these are the 4 right efforts again. He makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind and strives. One so practices the way to the cessation of unwholesome thoughts. What are wholesome thoughts? They are the thought of renunciation, the thought of non-ill will, and the thought of non-cruelty. These are called wholesome thoughts. And what do these wholesome thoughts originate from? Their origin is stated. They should be said to originate from perception. What perception? Though perception is multiple, varied, and of different aspects, there is perception of renunciation, perception of non-ill will, and perception of non-cruelty. Wholesome intentions originate from this. And where do these wholesome thoughts? And where do these wholesome thoughts cease without remainder? The cessation is stated. Here, with the stilling of applied and sustained thought, a monk enters upon and abides in the second jhana, which is self-confidence and singleness of mind, without applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of concentration. It is here that these wholesome thoughts cease without remainder. Stop here for a moment. In this second jhana, the mind becomes so concentrated that no thought can surface. And here, this state of the second jhana sometimes is called the state of the Aryan silence, where no more, the mind stops thinking, no thoughts at all. He only experiences delight and pleasure. And how practicing does he practice the way to the cessation of wholesome thoughts? Here a monk awakens zeal for the non-arising of unarisen evil, unwholesome states, etc., etc. He makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind and strives. One so practices the way to the cessation of wholesome thoughts. Now, carpenter, when a man possesses what 10 qualities do I describe him as accomplished in what is wholesome, perfected in what is wholesome, attained to the supreme attainment, and ascetic invincible. Here a monk possesses the right view of one beyond training, the right thoughts of one beyond training, the right speech of one beyond training, the right action of one beyond training, the right livelihood of one beyond training, the right effort of one beyond training, the right recollection of one beyond training, the right concentration of one beyond training, the right knowledge of one beyond training, and the right liberation of one beyond training. When a man possesses these 10 qualities, I describe him as accomplished in what is wholesome, perfected in what is wholesome, attained to the supreme attainment, and ascetic invincible. This is what the Blessed One said. The carpenter Panchakanga was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So here the last part, the Buddha says, the supreme attainment, this ascetic invincible possesses the noble eightfold path of the Arahant, the 8 factors of one beyond training. The one beyond training is the Arahant who has finished his work, and then the 9 and the 10 is knowledge, knowledge of liberation and the liberation. So here, instead of the 4 qualities stated by Ugaha Mana, the Buddha mentions first you're going to understand what are wholesome habits and what are unwholesome habits, and how to practice the way to develop wholesome habits and to eliminate unwholesome habits. Also, what are wholesome thoughts and what are unwholesome thoughts, and how to develop wholesome thoughts and how to get rid of unwholesome thoughts. And practicing in this way, together with the other factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, then one can attain the enlightenment and becomes an ascetic invincible. That is a supreme attainment. Okay, we stop here for tonight. If they want to progress, they have to go to the best teacher in the world, and the best teacher in the world is the Buddha. Study the Buddha's words. There's so much practical instruction in the Buddha's words. Instead of getting instruction from the Arahant Sammasambuddha, a lot of people go to a lot of meditation monks and all that who are not who way below the Buddha standard. So the Buddha already said after he's gone, take the Suttas and the Vinaya as our teacher. So if we look into the suttas, then only we can understand what is wholesome, what is unwholesome. So the spiritual path, a lot of people forget. It's not about attaining this and attaining that. It's about letting go, especially letting go of the ego and the temper, the temper that comes from the ego, and the jealousy and the backbiting and all these things. So if we practice correctly on the spiritual path, our ego should year by year reduce, become more and more humble. And whatever attainment you have, you don't boast, not like some people. They think they are Sotapanna, and then I heard of somebody trying to tell his friends that he's already attained Sotapanna because he's certified by his meditation teacher. And then when his friends didn't believe, he got angry. So always remember, it's a path of letting go, path of humility. So a lot of people, they because of worldly habits, in the worldly life, success is measured by how much you have, right? So in the same way, a lot of people come to the spiritual path. They think they have to attain this, attain that, and tell people they have attained this and attained that. But the spiritual path is completely different. It's a path of letting go of the ego. The Buddha says that we should be like a gong, a bell that is cracked. When a bell is cracked, you hit it, there's no sound. Not like a lot of people, they hit the bell, bong, very loud. Want everybody to know. Blow the trumpet very loud. So the best teacher is the Buddha, and we study the Buddha's words. We know how to practice correctly.
In the suttas concerning the 37 Bodhisattva, the Buddha listed it as the four foundations of mindfulness. Then the second is the four right striving. The third is the four physics, psychic power. Then five faculties, then five power, then seven enlightenment factors, and then the eighth Gotama. So when a person practices this, does it go by disorders or is good?
No, actually these 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas, they are also can be said to be just the Noble Eightfold Path. So in the Noble Eightfold Path, the way to practice is mentioned by the Buddha, I think in the Sutta Majjhima Nikaya 117, that we have to start with right view. If you remember last year we went through the Samyutta Nikaya, and there under the Bojjhanga Samyutta, the Buddha says first, even mentioned in some previous sutta we read, first you got to have faith in the teacher, and then when you have faith in the teacher, you draw close to him, associate with him, visit him frequently. Then after that you show respect. When you show respect, then only you are worthy of teaching. Then the teacher will teach you the Dhamma. Then you listen to the Dhamma. Listening to the Dhamma under the Bojjhanga Samyutta is Sati. That's how to practice Sati. In the Bojjhanga Samyutta is listening to the Dhamma is Sati. And then after you listen to the Dhamma, then you reflect on it, and then you investigate it. That is Dhamma Vichaya. Dhamma Vichaya, another factor of the Bojjhangas. So this in the Noble Eightfold Path, the first factor we should develop is right view. And right view comes from listening to the Dhamma. And if your mind is clear enough, if you are intelligent enough, you have enough wisdom, when you listen to the Dhamma, then the Buddha says in some sutta we went through, you gain a reflective acceptance of the Dhamma. That means you reflect on what you have heard, the Dhamma, then you accept it just by. But that of course means you understand it so when you understand the Dhamma and you accept it, you have already attained right view, and that brings you into the first path. You are the first path attainer. But then after that, you have to continue practicing. Listen to more Dhamma and try to meditate to sharpen your mind, get rid of the 5 hindrances. So in the same lifetime, the Buddha says the first path will turn to fruition, sotapanna, first fruit. So the first factor is right view, and then after right view, then right view will bring you into right thoughts. Once you have right view of the Dhamma, then you will start to think with right thoughts. And because of your right thoughts, you will start to speak. You to have right speech, because before you can speak, you must think first, right? So your speech depends on your thought. So also your actions also depends on your thought. So when you have right thoughts, you will also naturally have right actions. And this right speech and right actions plus right thought will give you right livelihood. And then after that, as you progress, you want to improve your character, then you practice this right effort. Constantly watch your mind, get rid of unwholesome thoughts and develop wholesome thoughts. So that is right effort. And then after that, right sati. Right sati is to be mindful, not to let the mind wander out to worldly things, to constantly put your mind on 4 objects of sati, the nature of the body, your feelings, watch your feelings, and watch your mind, and recollect the Dhamma. So that is right sati. And then if you practice meditation, meditation in the Buddha's teachings is always samatha meditation, because remember Ananda was asked what type of meditation is praised by the Buddha, and remember Ananda said the first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana, only this is Buddhist meditation. So when you practice this meditation, that will bring you to the jhanas, the last factor. So the Noble Eightfold Path has to be practiced in that way. So same with this 37 Bodhipakya Dhamma. Okay, shall we end here?